It's that time of the week, and I'm back once again with a brand new episode of Inspiration. Some of you may have thought that inspiration is all about cricket. It is not. It is about sport. And when I talk Indian sport, the one name that stands out, one of the greatest legends that this country has ever produced, is the king of the 64 squares, Viswanathan Anand. Talk chess, talk the revolution that this country has seen in this game, and the one name that stands out is Vishy Anand. Beating Boris Gelfand for his last world championship, he's a phenomenon. Starting out in 1987 as a young champion, continuing for 25 years at the very top to win another title, he's still very much reckoned as one of the greatest ever chess players of all time. If you take a list of Indian sport across generations, Viswanathan Anand will be right up there. As a result, it will be my great pleasure to talk to Viswanathan Anand today over the next 45 minutes about inspiration. Thank you, Vishy. Thank you very much for speaking to me on Inspiration. To be at the top of international sport for 3 decades, ruling his own sport in a manner that we hardly associate with an Indian sportsperson, Viswanathan Anand is unique. Whether it's the junior championship in 1987 to the Boris Gelfand championship in 2012, he has actually captured our imagination and given us a new lifeline in a sport, and told us that you can also be world champion. I mean, can you first tell me about this sustained period of excellence? For us, sport won Olympic medal in 92 years or 96 years, and that's about it. But our rebut was, we have Anand. Tell me about that.
Well, that's the way it's turned out. I mean, when I was young, clearly there were a lot of things that were being, that I did for the first time. First Asian to be world junior champion, first Indian to become a grandmaster. And so there was this period of my life where almost everything I did was a first of some sort. And there was no pressure because it was all so clearly unexplored territory. I would say roughly the period from 1987 till about 2000. I participated in a couple of World Championship matches already. But I also got to experience this life with which we were not that familiar, which is the life of a top chess player, going to the best tournaments, playing against the best players, and all that involves. Then the second phase, let's say that in 2000, I felt that I had done the trying hard, the striving, and it was time to actually win it. And then I won it. And then very quickly, within a year, I lost it. So you had this feeling, where did that go? Then a period when there was some instability in the chess world. So by the time I won my second title, it was, there was a 6-year gap, during which I did quite well. I mean, I was actually able to focus on my chess and attain a lot of milestones. Then the period as world champion for 7 years. And this really was a second win because it came when I was 36. So I won my title roughly when I was 36, defended it for another 6 years. And then this third phase, post the title, which again, I don't really know how long it's going to go or things like that, but I enjoy, just seeing how long I can hang in there, compete, and that's how it's going. So, and suddenly you look back and you think 3 decades have passed. But these are the 3 dominant phases, I think.
You said you were the first. You were. How did it happen? I mean, take me backstage for an Indian kid coming up. We all heard about the Russians, whether at that point in time, an Indian kid aspiring to be world chess champion many times. it was not part of our imagination. This is not cricket. This is not something that, okay, you've experienced before. Yes, there is a Sultan Khan tradition which we talk about in the 1930s and that tradition. But, tell me about that. Where did that seed come? How did Viswanathan Anand even contemplate? How did you practice? How did you imagine? How did you get yourself ready? Tell me about that phase.
It was very much an era of innocence. I mean, in that period, very young, when people asked me what I wanted to become in chess, I would immediately say world champion. And a couple of people later on told me that they were very surprised to hear that. But for me, it didn't strike me even as arrogant or ambitious or even difficult. I just said it without thinking of anything about what was involved and whether it would be difficult. I just didn't think in those terms. It was an innocent answer given. And almost naive. I would just say it, I have to become world champion because I've picked up these 3 books of Karpov, Spassky and someone else, and that's it. That's what I'm going to be. And the second thing is, of course, my training was very, very spontaneous and innocent. There was innocent. There was no structure to it. I would go to the chess club and I would play 5-minute games all day long. And I was very regular. I would go Monday evenings, I'd go Thursday evenings. I'd spend the whole of Sunday there. I'd finish my homework on Saturday to be there on Sunday. I would compete in almost every tournament there was. And that was my training. My training was just to play again and again and again. And one of the things that I like to say is that this worked out to be the perfect kind of preparation, because it made me very flexible. I was able to cope with problems as they arose. And my chess knowledge wasn't structured. It was, my brain wandered and it found its way. And maybe in a way my ambition also was just very innocent and found itself.
When we as middle class Indians grow up, there is always the issue of balance between academics and sport. In your case, how was it? How did you manage that? I mean, how did it become a passion to a profession?
Well, I had this typical attitude of many people, is that they want to put off this thought. Is there going to be a decision-making moment, And I simply fell into the game, so to speak. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Anything else was for a couple of years later. But I was very lucky. My parents were very supportive. Even I remember when my exams clashed with some minor tournament. It was not a big tournament, some minor open tournament in the club. If I would finish my do well in the exams and I'd finish my studies before the next exam, they would say, okay, if you want to go to the club for an hour. And I don't know how they felt about it, but at the very least they wanted to show, give me the reassurance that there was no tension for them. And that was very good for me. My school was also supportive. And so I never had this feeling that I'm fighting the system or something like that. And very important, my breaks came at the right time. I became national champion just after my 10th standard exams. I became world junior champion just a little bit after my plus 2 exams. So maybe at a lot of the critical moments when you hesitate the most, you think, am I really going to make it? Or how realistic is this? Am I dreaming? I had very, very positive feedback, so to speak. And this made the decisions effortless. But I know a friend who said to me, it's not that I chose to play chess, it's that I would have one day had to choose not to do it.
Nice.
And I think that's what happened to me. I fell into it, and unless there was a ridiculously good reason not to do it, this was what I was going to do.
Love it. This is exactly how, we call it destined, maybe, who knows. But when you actually burst into the scene, the Karpov, Kasparov world, how did they look to you? You were this exotic Oriental in that sense. Did they ever think an Indian will come and challenge them? How was your first encounter with these legends? And tell me about that. How did the world perceive Viswanathan Anand coming from India?
I think they are happy to see the sport grow. Definitely, the fact that in many countries the place where people used to go to play was often the Soviet cultural center or some equivalent meant that they were trying to promote the game. For a lot of our grandmaster tournaments, we'd have these visiting Soviet grandmasters come and play. I don't know for them it was a chance to travel to a new country, and usually it almost became an exhibition, except we were a decent bunch, so it wasn't that easy. And slowly word spread. I mean, I think they must have thought, okay, he's talented, it's quite interesting, he plays well above the level that we usually encounter in a country without chess tradition. And I was spoken about a fair amount. And then over time, the mixture of, a trained mind tends to regard all these people doing spontaneous stuff as something wild. And so, you get a little bit of this, he's a coffee house player, he's too casual. It's good, but, when it comes to this World Championship cycle, which is such as an efficient pruning process, he won't last, and that sort of stuff. So it's a mixture of appreciation, let's say almost welcomingness. They were very friendly to me. When I went to play there, maybe they treated me like anyone else, and that's all you really ask for.
Here, for example, Gorki Shodon and Alekhine Chess Club was our base. I mean, all of us sort of used to play as school students, and there were competitions that we played in. But that World Championship match of yours in 1995. So at that point, it would come in, on Doordarshan around the middle of the night, and I would stay up and watch, and very grainy pictures. But that sort of changed our imagination about the game, in the sense it gave us the belief, yes, you started well. And can you talk to me about that? I mean, that match, it was built up in this country as a massive match. Your preparation, and then how do you cope with failure?
So for that match, I went through a long qualification cycle full of the candidates' matches. But the funny thing is, because the split of the chess world had happened, then I had actually played 2 cycles. And one cycle led to Karpov at that point, and one cycle led to Kasparov. The more relevant point is, in fact, I played twice the qualification cycle, so the training level and the experience I gained was much more. But still, I would say that I had simply no ability to visualize a 20-game match. Even 12 was pushing it. The longest matches I played until that point were 8, and then this one Kamsky match went beyond that.
Yes.
But otherwise, the matches were all 8 games or less. So this was an unusual, and in a sense you can see it in this match that the first 10 games I drew the match, and the second 10 games I got blown away. So I had simply not realized that you can have a good team, you can do months of preparation, and still you simply run out of stuff mentally, physically, psychologically at a certain point. And the match took a sudden violent turn. I made this typical rookie mistake of, so I prepared 2 openings. And the 10th game would have been the perfect moment to switch to the second one. But we just decided to stick with what we knew. And this was, again, a little bit naive, person lacking experience. That's the sort of thing, rookie mistake you do. And exactly the 10th game was where he was waiting for me. But I don't even mean this in a chess sense. The moment I walked into that game and I saw Kasparov sitting there, I knew that this was a man who almost couldn't contain himself. And the reason later on I understood was he and his team had finally found a good idea that they were very happy with. And imagine if I had sidestepped this line at that point. I think psychologically the effect would have been huge. A man who's just waiting to show that one idea suddenly has to think again. This is not even about chess. This is just the disgust at having to think again and do something different from what you've been waiting for. Instead, he was waiting for me, and I walked in there, and I still feel ashamed of that decision. So I just walked into it. He hit me with this idea, and it didn't, he equalized, and then then things happened. I started to make mistakes at moments where I simply couldn't understand why I'm making these mistakes. And this is the thing, that at a match with such high tension, you cease to be the person that you think you are. So defeat, in the end, I didn't mind too much. By the second half, I was taking blow after blow, and then I missed a chance to narrow it a little bit in the 17th, and that match just fizzled out after that.
But if I can push you a little bit there, in our perception, at one level you're invincible, you're super successful, you're a superstar, but that failure, I mean, you're saying you walked into a bit of a trap, and then you're asking your own self, why am I making this mistake? If I can ask you to tell me about your mindset and how do you cope with that inadvertently I'm making mistakes, because as mortal minds, as normal human minds, when you make a mistake and you get into that cycle of negativity, in your case, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with failure?
Well, so in the 11th game, I was doing the sensible thing. I had been caught off guard. He had changed his openings, and I was being very sensible about it. This is all according to plan. If I had drawn that game, I had a slight edge, but nothing spectacular. If I had drawn the game, gone back home, the match would have continued on an even score. And the importance of an even score is that it puts the same amount of pressure on your opponent as on you. The moment you give them a 1-point lead or a 2-point lead, the margin for error goes up, and so the dynamics change. And I made the most elementary blunder and lost in 2 moves. And right afterwards, you can see it, and then you can't unsee it. You can no longer imagine what kind of person misses that tactic. But I did miss it. So sometimes what is right in front of your eyes you miss, and then you cannot explain to yourself how it could have happened. And this one was really elementary. So you curse yourself. But the other thing I would say is that my attitude was again a bit inappropriate for a World Championship match there. I had the feeling I'm going to turn up, I'm going to play good moves, and that ought to be enough, under the right circumstances. But
so what should be the attitude then?
Very much what I did with my match with Kramnik in Bonn, which is I really thought, what is the kind of match I want to play? And I decided that involved me changing my first move, just to give you an example. And then I spent the year leading up to the match changing that. But the very fact that you make such a big decision, you're going to switch your openings, go in and play openings that you're basically unfamiliar with, and you're going to cope with the unknown slightly. It changes your whole mental makeup because it gives you something to look forward to. That's not to say this attitude is always going to work. Sometimes it can fail badly. But I think you need some sort of mental approach, some overall strategy which apply for the whole match. Not simply say, I'm just going to go make good moves here and there, and I worked out my... Kramnik once criticized me, I mean, not directly, but he was talking about his own experience of preparing for Kasparov. And he said, I didn't get the feeling that Short or Anand had any sort of strategy for a match at all. And I think he was right.
If I ask you, and it might sound a little naive, but I really want my viewers to know, when you're preparing for a World Championship match, give me a sense of the mental, give me a sense of the physical, give me a sense of the preparation. So give me a sense of how it all comes together for a champion.
Well, based on what you know about your opponent and what you know about yourself, nonetheless, I think it's important to start doing it again, because over time, if you know someone for 4 or 5 years, and clearly Kasparov was already world champion for 10 years at that point, so you get the feeling that you know him well. But it's good to look over his games very slowly, one by one, almost a fresh look at that person, and try to just get a sense of when they do well, when they do badly, when is it the mistakes come out from them, and things like that. Then you need to be able to do this with yourself. Again, you think you know yourself, but there are a lot of details that you're probably not noticing. Once you do that, then you have to think, what are the situations that I expect to happen in the match? Which are the ones that I think are favorable for me, and how do I, push the match in that direction? Which are the ones which are unfavorable? And how is it my opponent is going to try to lure me there, and how do I get out of that? That sort of visualization, a lot of it, and the more you do is better. Then you get into the technical work, and by the time you get into the technical work, I think once you feel this thing about where you're heading for in the match intuitively, and you've done that stage well, then the technical work will be better, and because it's better informed. Also about the mundane, the food, the mental, the preparation, the relaxation, how do you unwind? Give me a sense of that also, because I really want to understand the mind of a champion approaching something which nobody from his country has ever done. Everything is an unknown.
Tell me about that also. I mean, what do you eat? Or do you have to maintain a routine? Do you have to, okay, this is the kind of fitness I want to get into, physically and mentally?
Yes, I would say physically, let's start physically. The most important thing is stamina. You want to be able to handle 6 hours of tension and then your brain not to tire. When you get tired, suddenly you start forgetting things, and that's when the blunders come up. So during all my matches, the mornings we'd meet up, go for a run, or go climbing, whatever it is, we could really raise our heart rate, and that was also good because chess builds up tension. You build up tension. You're constantly lost in your own thoughts. You have a lot of negative and positive emotions sitting inside, and they're just knocking around. And I wonder sometimes if the physical training you do is to get rid of tension, or it's to build your ability to sustain pain. I don't know which it is. The other thing, again, is good sleep. The better you can sleep.
But can you, under pressure, under tension?
It's hard. It's hard. I mean, the usual routine works well for me, which is that I'm quite exhausted by about 11, 12 at night. I fall asleep, and then in the morning, usually I sleep soundly till about 9. So I'm getting a good night's sleep. But the days I've lost a game and so on, you know that despite your best efforts, no matter what you do, that night is going to be miserable. And those nights, I wish I could tell you I've found a solution. I haven't. But mostly I would say the idea of training is to build resilience. So everything you do in a training camp is to build resilience. You build lots of ideas so that even if the first few run out, you've got more to use. You want your best ideas to withstand scrutiny by your opponent. But you also want your physical reserves to be high. So if you keep on running every day, you push yourself a little bit, you feel that your endurance will have built up by the time. Because during a match, you have the feeling that you're drawing down on everything. You're not regenerating, you're just drawing down on the reserves you've built up. Almost like a bear. So that's one thing. And I think, again, the more times you've rehearsed the scenarios that can go this way or that way, the more you've thought about it, and the more time you've given yourself away from the game. Both are healthy. So easily during prior camps, I was doing 8 to 10 hours a day. Nowadays, I would try to fine-tune this a bit more.
Before I go into a break, if I move away a little bit from, can you tell me about family, about Aruna, about parents and Team Anand in that sense? How important is this cocoon? I mean, for example, every professional engagement is taken care of, managed. As a high performance athlete, you're almost cocooned from the outside world in a sense. You have to focus on your game. That's about it. Can you tell me about that and how important that is, this support system?
I think it's nice. For instance, with my mother, she was traveling with me till I was about 15, 16. And then slowly, as I started to go abroad more often and so on, she couldn't come that often. When you're young, of course, the practical aspects were taken care of. Equally importantly, I don't know if you're equipped to handle that much freedom right away. Mm-hmm. And if there's no one watching you, you're completely free. It's not really a question of developing bad habits. You can also become lazy. You can, as anyone who's left to their own devices, can slacken their targets by themselves. That can happen, and that is one important value. But still, I think there is some amount of energy that goes in dealing with practical stuff. This is not universal. I always like to say that someone like Koch and I like to pick a fight just before a tournament so that it would sustain him during the tournament, whereas someone like me tries to close all the fights before a tournament starts so that I can just enjoy playing. For me, a lot of the practical stuff, booking tickets, this, that, there's this chess player's need to micromanage stuff, and you start getting obsessed with getting some little detail right, and it takes some energy away from you. So about a year after we got married, Aruna started to slowly take a lot of the practical details. So she started booking our tickets, making suitcases and so on. And initially, I resisted. So it took some adjustment, but eventually I would say, yeah, I got to like it again. It just became nice. And clearly this approach almost, I would say, peaked when it came to the matches, because for months leading up to an event, I would not have to think about anything but the chess. And I got used to being in a complete cocoon. And then I would isolate myself even more. When I got to my later matches, based on my own life experience, I felt, I don't enjoy reading the interviews of my opponents or the criticism that people read. So why bother reading that stuff? Let's filter it out and that sort of thing.
Your new book, Mind Master. Tell me.
Well, so it is biographical, but a slightly different format. So what I try to do is to, instead of a flow of events from the start of my career to now, what we have are, more importantly, I think the lessons that I found most important, and the moments where I felt those lessons came up the most often. So it's that kind of flow. I think really it's about the things I've learned playing chess. What is important in life, how do you learn, how do you cope with failure, how do you deal with success, these sort of things. And based on my experience, and specifically which tournament or which thing I think taught me that experience most strongly.
Give me one example. Give me one story that stands out.
Well, I mentioned that I felt that my growth in chess had been very natural, spontaneous, without the kind of template or the thing that a trainer would have done. And when I look back on my own thing, I tried to pull out my first win against Manuel Aaron and my early growth as a chess player till the time I became a grandmaster, and talk about how the spontaneity and simply learning through pleasure helped me absorb a lot of useful lessons. And one of the things that struck me is I would go for a long period without any success, and then suddenly there'd be this explosive few months when everything would go great. And I felt really that this came from all those months of spontaneous learning. Second thing, there are chapters on the disappointments like New York, but one of my favorite chapters was looking back on my match with Kramnik in Bonn. Simply because, well, that's the best match I've played in my life. Against such a great opponent to have such a great result. I mean, it's clearly the
high point.
The high point in a match sense. And before that match, this interview from 8 years back of Kramnik, where Kramnik said, when I studied the games of Anand and Short for that match, I didn't get the feeling they'd put any thought into a thing. I mean, it's not like I was really, but that thought stayed in my head, like a pinball ricocheting. And when, so right after, we described in the book how I just finished the Mexico tournament and became world champion. And I was going to defend my title a year later. And my thoughts already started to move on to what am I going to do against Kramnik. And the first thing I wanted to do is to switch. So I wanted to switch from E4, which is my lifelong opening, to D4. And but this is like saying I'm going to switch from a language in which I'm fluent to something in which is clearly my second or third language, and I'm going to try to deal with it. On the one hand, there's all the problem of unfamiliarity, the lack of familiarity. But the more important thing I thought was I'd be excited every day, because every day you'd feel like you're learning something new, and there are things you would not forget because they're fresh. And there was a slight sense of excitement. I'm going to do something unexpected and it's going to be fun. And clearly that joy was a very important part of it. That anticipation, that rush was a very important part of why that match was my most successful ever. So that's one chapter. Later on I come to the Gelfand match, which is just two matches later.
In fact, let me just add a question, you can answer that together. You said this was the high point, the Kramnik match, and the Gelfand match. In one of our earlier interviews, you said it had been difficult. So if I could ask that as well, that how do you say that it was your high point, and what makes you say that everything was in place? And the other one, how tough is it when you are not at your best but still going on to win? You made that win possible. Tell me about that journey.
Okay, so in the Kramnik match, the most important thing was when I was sitting at the board, I never felt completely safe. But looking back at my moves and recalling how I felt, because your memories can be deceptive, I had the feeling that I was excited to think and solve problems every day on the chessboard. And that's a feeling that I've never had for such a sustained period like in that match, and anything else I can remember. Then I remember after a long time, my previous match had been with Kasparov in 95. And a long match. And then 13 years later, I had assembled a big team again. And so I had 4 trainers, plus, Aruna was doing all the arrangements on the other side. I had a German friend who was accompanying us and helping us. So, after a long time, I had a big team again. It brought back some vague memories, but this time I had the feeling that I had developed too much as a person to draw too much from the previous experience. I'd gone very far. But it was exciting. We were 4 guys, and I had lots of young players. I had Wojtaszek and Ganguly, both quite new, joining me in my team. And I did this specifically to stir it up a bit, that they would expose me to new ways of thinking. And the idea was not to go for my usual predictable set of seconds, but to mix it up. And on top of that, we had access to a new kind of computer engine. So instead of a chess playing engine running on my machine, that was the first time it was running somewhere else. And I was accessing it over the internet. Which means, of course, that could be 10, 15, 20 times more powerful than my machine.
Correct.
And so there was this excitement every day. Let's ask God, what he thinks about this position. Let's ask the oracle. And every day to spit out something. That doesn't make any sense. Let's try to understand why. So it was very exciting creatively. And the other thing was before that match, I remember Aruna asking me, how do you feel about this match? Do you feel it's being foisted on you, or because one of the things that happened was by winning Mexico, I was obliged to play Kramnik the next year automatically. And so she asked me if I felt it was being foisted. I said, I don't know about that, but I really want to play it. And then she said, okay, good. Now that I know what to do in the negotiations, kind of thing. So that was a very strong feeling as well. So it's a combination of this thing. Simply this, after a long time, it felt exciting to play a match. And I felt if I lose this, I lose this. I'm not going to be hard on myself. I won Mexico, and that's enough. And I don't care. But I'm going to go and have fun. And it almost felt like I didn't worry about the result. Because honestly, it's not a huge embarrassment to lose to Kramnik either in a match. So I knew that I was safe. You're playing someone equal. There was no pressure. And it was just very exciting.
And 2012?
2012, well, let's start with a disclaimer. First of all, it's very difficult to do this completely new thing every time. Already in the Topalov match, I felt that Topalov had anticipated all the unexpected things I could do, and he had tried to plug them. So, first of all, your opponents react. You do something well and surprising, the next time they're ready to block it. And this was the 3rd match after that. This was Gelfand. And by Gelfand, I feel I had been, my joy in chess had been shuddering to a halt almost. That sounds extreme, and it probably is. But I would say that till 2010, my tournament results were very good as well as my match. Though I struggled against Topalov, I was coming back on my own merit, even after some tough losses. Then I had this decline in tournaments, which predated the Gelfand match by about a year. So from May 2011 till May 2012, when I played the match with Gelfand, my tournament results were just embarrassing. So that was one worrying sign. And finally, this one win I pulled off against Gelfand, game 8, after losing game 7. To this day, I don't feel that I deserved it. I feel like God lifted me up and dropped me over that point, because Gelfand blundered. Of course, that's not entirely true. I did set him 1 or 2 problems. I did make some unexpected decisions at the board, and these things don't happen completely unexpectedly. But still, to this day, I feel that I look back on it as a miracle rather than an achievement, and that brought me back into the match. And it is true that for the tie breaks, the team also functioned creatively again. So what had happened in the interim? I think we simply got tired of it, and we were having difficulty coming up with fundamentally new approaches. But also, I think the excitement of playing this match after a long time had gone. We were now doing one every year. I mean, I played this match in 2008, October, and then in the whole of 2009, it seems like negotiations for the match with Topalov was happening here or there, and finally it happened in 2010. And then right afterwards, the next match got foisted on. But in the meantime, it had already become clear that after the Gelfand match, there'd be a match right away in 2013. There are some other reasons, because FIDE was trying to still... so basically, because the two cycles had been merged, they were trying to... There was a traffic jam of people who felt they had a shot at the title, and FIDE was trying to accommodate all of them, and so everyone was in. And that's why I played 4 matches in 6 years, which is high, because normally you'd play 3. And the other thing is, I think these matches were coming one after the other. And by the time the match finished, you could see it in the eyes of all my team members and me.
You did?
That we were all just happy to go home and not see each other for a couple of months. And
despite being world champion.
And we are very good friends still, and even in the periods between the matches, but you could see that we were just happy. Well, I can give you one clue. I never took a second to a tournament. I simply did not want to have a second again for a tournament. Now, it doesn't necessarily help you always, but still, at least one tournament I could have tried, and I didn't. And I think by the third match, we were also, again, to this day, we all like each other, and we look back on this thing warmly, but we were sick of each other. Little things were starting to irritate each other. There were verbal arguments, quickly snuffed out, but felt people were exercising self-control rather than the thing. Whereas the first match, it seemed like we could tease each other no end. But the second match, somebody would tease the other guy and the others would look and think, is this going to blow up? So there was that, and really the same attitude applied on the chessboard was the problem. That for the Gelfand match, we were so predictable that we didn't manage to come up with anything that could surprise him till about the tie breaks. And that was bad.
2 questions, my time's running out. One, you as a husband, how are you at home? What do you eat? What's your, do you watch movies? Do you listen to music? When you and Aruna have your private time, how's the son? I mean, when you have traveling with family for a holiday, give me a sense of the private Viswanathan Anand.
Well, let me start, of course, when we got married. Initially, she didn't know anything about chess. And in fact, in our honeymoon tournament, I went to a tournament right away, she would... We played in an auditorium which was very dark and air conditioned. So afterwards, I realized that she was just dozing off, and then when she heard any clapping or something, she'd wake up and get up and go to the ladies' room. So later on, I would find her there and knock and basically indicate it was safe for her to come out. So she'd come out, and then she'd say, "What happened?" or something like that. And that first tournament. It was fun because actually it was one of my best results. I made +5 and I was joint winner there. The funny story, of course, is that before my wedding, many of my chess playing friends had written a card at a tournament saying you were a good player. And the other one was, I hope you're ready to lose 50 rating points. In fact, I won about 40 rating points after my marriage. So getting up to December. Eventually, she'll figure out that I'm slightly weird at tournaments because something is getting warped. It's clearly the tension involved and the effort that you're putting into the game. But mostly we traveled, she would arrange a lot of stuff, but she was traveling everywhere to me. So even with me. So even when she was not managing stuff, which is really an arrangement we came to a bit later. She was everywhere with me. So we were very close all the way till 2010 because traveling everywhere as a team. 14 years of marriage, always together. And then suddenly it became different, which is that 2011, but already from the time she was expecting, she stopped traveling. And for her that was very strange because for 1 year, she didn't even go near the airport. So 2011 was a period of big adjustment. For the first time I was traveling alone. I mean, she was still managing everything, but I had to get used to being at tournaments alone. I had to get used to dealing with people again alone. That was nice. But on the positive side, I think for both of us, it's of course a huge emotional change to have a son. And in fact, most of the rest of at tournaments, I'm looking forward to going back home and spending time again. And it's almost cathartic. You get home, and that's where you relieve all your tension.
You know, if I have to ask the future, you have redefined it. Okay, you're a superstar, you're a role model, you're an icon. What about the future? Grand Chess Tour, does that rejuvenate it? We've seen International Masters, Grand Masters, Indian Chess. All of that is fine. Where's the next Anand? I mean, we see a number of youngsters, 12, 13-year-old grandmasters. Are you happy with Indian chess? The scenario now, can the Grand Chess Tour rejuvenate it? What's your take on the future?
Well, first of all, personally, I'm already spotting most of the players that I play with a decade at least, if not close to 2. And frankly, given the demands of chess today and the pace at which it's going, this is quite hard. Having said that, I'm still able to play and cope, and it is satisfying that I do so. But I'm also able to, I don't want to say chess matters less to me, but it doesn't dominate my life or my thinking in the same way that it used to. So the Grand Chess Tour is something that I look forward to. Every year, I've played every tour so far. And it's nice and exciting. We play in a lot of new venues. I'm very happy that
India is now
Kolkata has joined the Grand Chess Tour because, this is a dream event to bring home. About Indian chess, there are things that I like very much and there are things that we need to work on. What I like is it's almost self-sustaining now, the momentum in Indian chess. There are a number of youngsters playing, and clearly the number of grandmasters we are getting at a younger and younger age, the number of people play. I mean, this is a chess movement that's huge. I can think of no country which comes close, except to some degree China, and there are some parallels, but I think we're really, in terms of chess momentum, it's huge. But clearly we need to work better on organization, more big chess tournaments, getting more sponsors involved. So that area needs to be filled. But clearly first you have to give them the performance. So we're doing well there. I would like to work with a lot of these youngsters and help them because I think in the future I'd be very proud if someone that I'd helped or worked with went on to become world champion. Mm-hmm. That I would say is a continuation of my legacy, if you like. And right now I'm still playing, but I'm trying to start these things. And hopefully I will continue to do that. I would also continue being around chess.
You have to. I mean, on that count, my time's up with Vishy, but one thing I will say, he's been an inspiration for me. I mean, I follow chess as an amateur, but just to see someone get where he has from being the boy next door, he's actually the Indian dream come real. That's what he is for me. His IQ 180, 190, his multiple world championship. These are the Viswanathan Anand for the statistics that all of us know about. But for me, the first Padma Vibhushan, and now for Padma Vibhushan, Khel Ratna in 91, I can keep rattling all of that. But for me, he's a dream. He's a dream that good boys come first. He's a dream that dreams do come true. And this middle-class Indian dream that Viswanathan Anand stands for and has ignited in us, youngsters and people of my generation, we are almost of the same age, That is a dream that for me is his lifelong legacy that will die with us. He has given us this lifeline that we can also do well in sport. And no one can take that away from him. Thank you very, very much, Viswanathan Anand. Thanks a lot.